Hey y'all, it's your co-host Yogi Rich, introducing episode 14 of OneAnswer Yoga. What is civilization? In this episode, we dive into what it means to be a citizen. What is right action? How are we meant to grow and operate within the world? What point of view should we have to this ethereal thing that we're all born into? We range across a bunch of different topics. We mentioned George Washington's farewell address, different Indian scriptures and texts that all sort of point us in the direction of universal unity between our neighbors. So, without further ado, please enjoy this next episode of One Answer Yoga. One love and peace.
Okay. Hello. Welcome back.
Hey there, hey everybody.
Nice to see you today.
Nice to see you too.
Yeah, I am recording from a 15-year-old boy's room today.
Mm,
So my background is reflective of that. For those of you who are trying to read those signs behind me, I'm just going to read them to you so you're not trying to zoom in and read them. They
yeah.
say, no trespassing. We're tired of hiding the bodies. And no trespassing. This house is protected by God and a gun. You trespass, you will meet them both.
All right.
I just
Yeah.
figured everybody watching is going to see those signs over my head and is going to be trying to figure out what they are. So I just get that out of the way right away.
No, thank you, because I was actually actively doing that. I just saw two pistols pointing this way, and I was like, little edgy, huh?
Yeah, I got a little edgy background today.
Yeah, I like that. That's all right. He's
Mm,
got some character. It's
how are you?
I'm great. I'm feeling blessed. I've yeah, spent the morning. It feels like every hour, every moment is unpredictable. And I went to teach a class today at 7:30 in Inglewood.
Mm,
I just started teaching there. And they have this new, it's like a greenhouse. Well, I teach in the greenhouse, but, the whole, thing about that particular spot, Grow and Gather, is they, grow a lot of their own food there.
mm.
They have, hydroponics, or I don't know, all this interesting systems. And it's and they're rebranding. We were talking about Casa Bonita. The, person who's running it is also the executive chef or something at Casa Bonita right now. And I think, I don't know all the details, but something related to South Park. Tyler, and I guess people around here know their names, but the people that started South Park, they
Yeah.
also have a construction renovation company, and they're, doing this work. So, it's kinda like an interesting little gig, and it's cute, it's on a little rooftop. Anyways,
Your
so
name is
I went
Matt and
there.
Trey Parker, right? Matt and Trey. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah,
Parker?
yeah, Trey, not
Yeah.
Tyler.
Matt and Trey.
Yeah, and,
I pulled that out of my 20s brain somewhere.
'cause it's so when I was getting informed about it, they're just saying their names, how do you not know who these people are? When we say
Yeah.
their names in this order, of course you're supposed to know who these are, but, it's cool because, they have, 10 days left. They're gonna, they rebranded the whole downstairs cafe, so it's gonna be, it's gonna be like a restaurant, cafe section,
Mm,
greenhouse, and then they have yoga upstairs on the greenhouse on the roof.
so
So
cool.
since they're under active renovation, when I went there this morning and I had Kimber with me, they were like, you can't be here while we're doing construction." Then I was like, "What?" "Well, I'm already here." And I'm like, he's like, "Well, I'll hold Kimber. I don't want her to go through, go through the building. They're painting the walls. Go through the building, and then, go, do your thing, unlock the gate, and the people can go through the outside gate." I get there, there's no key, and
Uh,
so I can't unlock any of the gates. Luckily, it's only the second class, so the person that's coming is someone that I, already know, and the person that Libby, I mentioned her before. So we ended up just, hanging out, walking the dogs, and then someone else is associated with the yoga studio. She pulled up, her name's Angela, a business witch on Instagram, and, we're part of this, yoga collective in Denver, but, she's, one of the founders, and Yeah, she just pulled up. We just hung out and we just talked about life. She was informing us about human design, and she was
Mm,
actively moving. That was her move out day. Like she met with her landlord and gave them the key while we were there. And like
wow.
she had AC units. Remember how I said I don't have AC? So like she
Yeah.
had some AC units that she was like giving away for the low. And then they also had tools like drills, like the tools that I left in Virginia. She had
Yeah.
a lot of those. Um, that was she was letting go for the low. So we just talked and chatted, and yeah, I learned a lot about human design, which was something that I heard about before, but never really dove into. So that was an interesting little subtopic, and then yeah, and then I came home right after that. Then my dog, that same person, Angela, the day before, no, Monday, she gave me many little tea lights, like is that what they're called? These little things.
Yeah.
Like literally like a 18 by 18-inch box full of them, and we just put them on the ground. So it's probably like 100 plus of them, and we put them on the ground. And then one of my dogs, Toph, he just decided to just eat a bunch. Uh, he just that's how he is. So, anyways, he was chilling, but then this morning, I guess like you know, push came to shove, and so right
Yeah.
when I came in the door, he was like, I
I gotta
stopped like
go.
I stopped like he just started running, and I was like, what happened? And then he's like, I think he needs to go outside. So
Oh.
yeah, that was a long-winded story about this morning, but that was like what caused the delay, but also like it was pretty interesting to be exposed to some new hearts and some new minds, and like.
Yeah.
Well, anything else you want to? Well, I mean, I have something that I've been thinking about, but is there anything
I
else?
was gonna say, what topic do you have for us today? I'm excited.
Hmm. So I wanted to do. We've been we've been talking a lot about like a lot of our conversations have centered around like or been about society and the individual, or like these kind of like concepts of like what can you do, and then how might this show up on a grander scale on society. So like to center the conversation a little bit, I was a lot of people have been talking about George Washington's farewell address.
Oh.
Ha-
Hmm.
have you ever heard of it or read it?
I don't think I've ever read it.
Have you heard of it like in any context?
Not really. Maybe in Hamilton?
I pulled Fox.
You pulled a
Interesting.
fox.
I pulled Fox just now. Um.
Wow.
So yeah, we'll see. I think we'll see. Let's see how this. We'll see how this ties in. But um, I really like to read source material. I think that's really what got me into yoga in the first place. Like my dad was always like, learn all you can learn, learn all you can learn. So like when I first got in like 2018 time frame, 2019 time frame, I was like, well, why don't I just read a lot of like the base things? Like, why don't I read like Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations, or like John Locke, or like these different things that are like the foundation of like the capitalist and democracy republic that we live in. And
Mm-hmm.
even like when Dylan Roof did like he did the shootings in the black church, and that was when the Confederate topic got brought up. I was like, well, why don't I just
Yeah.
read the articles? Why don't I just read like the letters of succession from the states and see
Yeah.
what they personally claimed? So that's like kind of like what I like to do. And um so anyway, so I'm listening to Scott Horton on Lex Friedman. He did a 10-hour podcast, and Scott Horton is the director of the anti-war or the Libertarian Institute, and he's like runs antiwar.com, and he's like
Oh,
um
is
and
this a new podcast? I haven't seen that one.
yeah, it's new. It's for the second one. Yeah.
Okay.
And he had done a debate, and he was a little bit frustrated at how Lex edited one part of it. And it was a 5-hour debate, and it was on Israel and Palestine, and Lex edited like
Ooh.
an hour of it, or he just it was like 40 some minutes of it, and it was like part of it was because it got a little disrespectful, and part of it though was the reason why he was a little frustrated with it was because you kind of the guest accused him of being anti-Semitic, and Lex ended up cutting his response.
Oh,
But he's like, I'm not anti-Semitic, like, this none of this, you kind of like are just throwing that out there. And so anyways, so they do like a 10-hour podcast, and in there he mentions George Washington Farewell's address. And I've heard people mention it before, but I was like, something clicked and I was like, why don't you just start reading it yourself, like, you
yeah.
know. And it made me think of the first point I want to say is like what is civilization? So we have to, like, we can use an even broader context, but like you can think of like American civilization, like, as because I'm using George Washington and like what were his thoughts, because it was very interesting because he was starting a civilization, and then he's reflecting on that in a way. So it's like, what is a citizen in the first place? And as I'm reading George Washington words, I'm like, the first thing is like literacy, because I'm like, if you can't read, if you can't read the Holy Quran, for example, or like if you can't, how in your Arab, how are you going to understand these words? If you can't read like in their own words. And I think like a lot of us, like, if you're just to pick up like one of their writings, like in text, any of their writings would be extremely difficult for like the average American who hasn't gone to like some sort of like collegiate level English to read, because it's so different, right? But anyway, so as I'm reading it, the point that they always emphasized in that is like George Washington's main recommendations were, do not have parties. That's what most people always say. They're like, and he's like, don't have parties, and don't have, first of all, like, specifically, don't entangle in European affairs, but more generally, broadly, don't have foreign alliances, because then
Mm-hmm.
those nations' alliances start to subvert your own. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what people have been emphasizing, I would say, for the last like 4 or 5 years that I've noticed. But as I read it, I was like, I wonder when this will come up. That didn't really come up to like the 12th page.
Hmm.
Very, very first thing he said, because he's like, thank you for this, is his farewell address. He's like, thank you for this opportunity, thank you to my people.
12th page. How long is his address?
It's long. It's deep.
How long was he up there talking?
It was like 38 pages. At least the way they have it in like the PDF form from Library of Congress, I think it's like 38 pages.
Wow.
I think it was
Oh my
long,
gosh.
and he was sitting there, and he's like, I don't even think I deserve this. Like, it's just like, it was a very humble like beginning, and he's like, I thought about this after deep introspection, and he was like, never forget the reason why we created these states is so that we are an. I had never heard this before, and I'm from Stafford, like, I
Yeah.
live next to Fredericksburg. And he's like, the reason why we created these states in the first place is to orient the states towards collaboration instead of war.
Uh,
He goes, he goes, it was like the first act, it was crazy. He was like, I gotta warn you guys though, what I'm thinking about, first is we have to always keep sight of that, and that the reason why we don't want our states to go to war is because the warring industry starts to rule the state and is antithesis to the republic.
right.
And the next thing he says is, do not call each other by your geographical locations. I hear the term northern and southern and eastern and western far too often.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was like, it'll make you forget your kinship. And it's dope because think about who he's talking to. He's talking to the other revolutionaries.
Right, of course.
You know what I mean? So he's like,
And he's coming from the perspective of being the first president. So like
yeah,
realizing what it's going to take to rule this nation.
mm, yeah,
Um I did
yeah,
look it up. It's 7,000 words. He did not deliver it as a speech. It was actually written. But
mm,
if you were to deliver it as a speech, it would be approximately, they said 20 to 30 minutes reading time.
okay,
So, yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
But like, it was very intriguing how he started with that, and it was very foreshadowing and like obviously heartbreaking given the history. Um, and But yeah, it's like I feel like I was very fortunate in my life to be exposed to certain things. I was exposed to certain information that I feel like gives me a different view on the American society and at least the ideals of like the social contract and all these different things. And but so many of us have a very different definition of what that means to be a member of a civilization, of what it means to be civilized in the first place. We were even teasing in previous conversations about like Northerners and Southerners, and like we're talking about Thomas Jefferson versus like Alexander Hamilton and their point of view and like how they viewed
Mhm.
civilization and what they thought civilization was. So I wanted to start with like the basic unit of a civilization is like, what is a citizen? What is a person? What does that really mean? Like, what does that mean to you? Does yoga give us any insight on how to be a citizen? Um, like how to kind of play this play of life all together in a collaborative way? Um, does yoga have any thoughts on government itself? Like, you know, that might translate from like that ancient culture that might be like a through line through today that might like help explain what it means to be a citizen. And yeah, just any kind of thoughts there, and we can branch off in any direction on what that might mean to you.
I don't know if this is answering those questions, but a couple of
Yeah,
things come to
yeah,
mind
for sure.
immediately when I was listening to you. First of all, is it's interesting because Swami Satchidananda always said, "Don't have boards," which is funny because our organization is full of boards. We have so many boards and committees and all these things. And Swami Satchidananda, before he passed away, was very clear. He said, "Don't have boards in the organization." But for some reason, we didn't feel like we should listen to him. So it was
Mhm.
curious to me that like George Washington had the same thing, right? Like
Mm,
don't have these identities. And then I was thinking about this identity and what it says in yoga of like, it is this false association with the identity that causes conflict. And so in one of the Shivananda, uh, songs that we had to learn when we were young or got to learn when we were young, one of the lines says, Mr. So and so is a false non entity. And so this idea that like calling yourself by anything, any association with anything is false. And it's like not really an entity. So I see how like even Washington and his enlightened state at that moment really saw that if we continue to associate ourselves with these different things, we are going to think again, we talked about this before of like that otherness,
yeah.
like creating somebody else to be the other is going to eventually break down because anytime you think of everything else as something other than you, then you're at conflict with it. So
Mm,
anytime we separate out, now again, our mind is set up in such a way that it wants to classify, judge, create these things. And so
mm,
part of the process of yoga is overcoming our mind's natural inclination to want to categorize and classify everything. But it's in that categorizing and classifying that we start othering things, saying, that's that, I'm this. And therefore, then it creates conflict between the things. And I just wonder, like, if we'd had actually listened to Washington, what would our country be like today? Like, if we didn't have the North and the South and the East and the West, and we didn't think of like, these people are doing that or having parties, right? Political parties. Imagine if we had done away with our political parties somehow. I don't know
mm.
what that looks like in a democracy or how that even works not to have political parties. I can't even comprehend it as I'm thinking about it right now. Kind of breaks my brain.
Yeah,
But and then also like this, again, like anytime you're associating with other causes or other people, like there's always going to be some sort of conflict that gets brought up that when you're in support of or not in support of rather than just being in obviously Washington wasn't speaking of it in like this yogic text, context.
yeah.
But it's interesting that um yeah, that's really what like first came up was like, wow, Washington was saying like don't have all of these
You know,
delineations and these controls. And then Swami Satchidananda was saying the exact same thing, like do not have all this stuff in the organization. And I'm always going back to the organization and being like, what would happen if we just went back to what he wanted us to do? Like, what would our organization look like if we did away with all of this that we created after he was gone and just went back to what he envisioned? And I wonder what would happen to our country if we went back to the image or the vision of what Washington had for us.
Yeah, I'm curious to know more of why Swami Sachinananda thought that way. And then I'm halfway through it, and he's at the part where he's explained the first reasons. And it was interesting for him to explain the party reason. He was like, for other reasons than we might think. Well, first he said that usually, like what you're saying with like the boards, and he goes, oftentimes your opposition, it can then be subversive because they have space to meet secretly.
Yeah.
And like, so then you're like, and it's like, oftentimes, like, yeah, oftentimes that's how the opposition comes. I, it really like made me teary eyed a little bit because it's like, it makes you think about um things that we've normalized essentially. And as like, almost like if someone, like, it's like someone took that and was like, hey, if you want to like kind of do the counter of all of these things, like this is great advice. This is great advice for the enemy to read, essentially, type energy. Like they know your playbook now. It's like, okay, we'll sow the seeds of division. So he continued on to say, another reason why not to have parties is that it makes a lot of space for foreign influence, because the foreign influence can aid a particular party in overturning another. And then he goes, the only society in which I love to bring this up to you because we could think about it out loud. It's like the only place where a parties make sense is in a monarchy, or when there's already an absolute ruler, because then the different factions can rally for the ear of the ruler, and like there could be like a hypothetical system in which there's a merit system based of ideas to. And it's interesting because like me personally, but many people feel like both of the major parties, in our place today, they all have, like, when it comes to many things, they all have the same position. It's like, this is the United States government position. And that position is made up of both halves. We can do the things in the media and do things on the smaller scale, but on the higher scale, like, we all act like, yeah, there's a position. There's certain things that both sides of the coin always vote towards. And um yeah, I don't know. It was kind of interesting because then it makes you think. The way I looked at it too was like, s- sometimes it's not like looking at things as like, okay, they went awry from the original intent. Sometimes I look at it as like, this present manifestation of whatever organization that it is, its its emphasis, like, it's essentially the people that are drifting it further and further and further away. Like, if they all came face to face with George Washington, all heard this address, and they still decided, like, you know what, we don't really care, we're gonna continue with this path, we're gonna continue with this way. Like, I don't know, there's something in us that we just have to learn from experience, and not just like trust that person, because that person could have been like you, and it's like, you have slaves, what do you know? Like, I'm just kidding, but like,
Right.
could
Yeah.
have been like, whatever. Like, and I wonder how much of that is in us to be like just rebellious, even if people that we look up to be like a little bit rebellious against them, not out of disrespect, but almost out of just like love of your own life and love of your own personal expression.
So fascinating because, like, when I met my husband, he was not into politics. He wasn't particularly into history, and that kind of stuff wasn't interesting to him. And I don't think he really was aware that there were other parties in the United States,
Mm,
because we have split into a two-party system, whereas many other democracies have multiple parties. And I think that's kind of part of the thing, is because now we're just hearing two warring voices as opposed to like five different viewpoints, which I think would be much more balanced. And I would love, love, love to see, someday a time when, we had a 5-party system as opposed to a 2-party system. But yeah, it's interesting to think, like, what when you have opposing forces, of course there's going to be opposition, right? You have to
Yeah.
It's like two forces. Eventually, I guess it makes sense that they got so far apart because there's pressure to be more and more opposing, having these opposing ideas. Like you believe this and we believe this, and so we have these like different viewpoints which are supposed to bring balance to our system. But instead, I feel like it's created too much conflict. Like he was saying, like it's automatically going to create conflict when you have these two people or these two different sides that are going at it all the time, all the time, all the time. Which, you know,
Mm.
it's interesting because it's also kind of the idea of why there's boards, right? Because boards are meant to bring lots of disparate voices together so
Mm.
that you don't get into too much of a silo of one idea. Um, and so on a really healthy board, you have different people who are bringing a wide range of really beautiful differing viewpoints. Um, as
Mm.
opposed to just having like, uh one or two different ways of looking at stuff,
Mm.
which, I mean, that seems like a good idea, but sometimes I think with Swami Satchidananda, I think the biggest thing was you can talk yourself to death. Like, you have too many committees. It's funny because I'm such like, I love this idea of, governing in business now. There's a real move for less hierarchical type of business, running a business and having it be more like, circular and inclusive. And so you don't have this system of like, this is at the top and all these people are underneath them. However, the way we try to do that often is in committees. And so we have the other side, especially in nonprofit organizations, you have all these committee systems. But what can happen is the committees are just so busy meeting and talking that it is very hard to like create the momentum and keep the momentum going for action. And what I've found, at least in my own leadership, is it really is supportive to have one person to just finally be like, okay, I hear you all. I took all the viewpoints into consideration, but now I have this umbrella picture and I'm going to be the one to actually make the decision. And I think that's what Swami Satchidananda was saying, was like, sometimes you need that one voice, that one person, that one leader who's willing to take responsibility for the entire, or be responsible for the entire wellness of the organization. I think that's what makes a good president too. When the president's like, look, I'm hearing the left, I'm hearing the right, I'm hearing all the different voices and all the
Mm.
different opinions, and I see a bigger picture than anybody. Ideally, the president would be seeing the biggest picture of anything that's out there. And then I am going to make a choice that is in the best interest for the majority or the nation as a whole, not just one party or the other party. I don't think we live in a political system that's working that way.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely haven't. Yeah, everything you said was fire. I love it. I mean, there's many things that we can play with there because it's like, um, I think that's kind of the main debate between us. Like, I was listening to another like recent thing was there's this guy named Patrick Bet David, and he has like a podcast, but he has like valuetainment. I don't know all that he does, but it's one of those like Jubilee roundtable things. You ever see that on YouTube? Where it'll be like one conservative versus 20 liberals, or
Mhm.
one capitalist versus 20 socialists or whatever. So there was like a little clip that I saw from it, and he was the capitalist talking.
Like throwing someone to the lions.
Literally, it's like you're in the center, and it's just a ring of people, and then like the people come up, and as they're talking, like the
Feels
all
very
the
Colosseum.
literally, it's funny because it's like at like a little like school desk. It's just like in an auditorium. Very oh my goodness, and like it's so a lot of it. You know, there's like sometimes it's kind of like clickbaity sometimes, but there's some interesting stuff in there because usually it's like someone who's a little bit more mature that's in the center, and then usually it'll be like kids, right, that are in the that and you know that are talking to them, like 20-year-olds, 25-year-olds, something like that. So so this woman's talking to Patrick Big David, and she had been on it a couple other times, and she's a communist, and she was explaining communism, and she's like, you know, stateless. It's like stateless, classless.
Uh-huh.
Dang, I forgot the last word. There's another one. Let me see. Uh-oh. Let's see. Stateless, classless, something society. Like stateless, classless, or moneyless, or something like that. Um, and I feel like there's people that are on that spectrum of how they'd like to see civilization be formed and organized based off of their temperaments and their belief systems. And then there's other people that are like more on the opposite scale of that like view of how civilization should be. And then I just
Uh-huh.
started thinking to myself, like, first on the first point, like both of these views of civilization are like were made in Europe, but also other than that, like who are we to think about civilization like that? Like how are we to how are we as members of a civilization supposed to like decide how the rest of the civilization should live so that we as members of the civilization have a more comfortable stay here? And I think like that's a question that seems to have an answer, but it's not always clear. And I think like what I loved about yoga and like more Eastern philosophy is that like at least when you learn about different aspects of society, there's more of a respect of different ways that people can coordinate based off of their temperaments, right? Like in a hypothetical ideal situation, rather than like all of us being pushed. Like if you went to school in America, probably you were pushed to be an administrator of some sort. Like you're pushed to be able to do spreadsheets, arithmetic. Like yeah, you can do liberal arts here and there, but you don't really truly explore the arts and sciences until you get into college or some sort of specialty school or something like that. If you went to public school, most of us are meant to like work for a job and work for a person and be able to have the mindset that like that supports that. Um. So, anyways, the way that we view our civilization, the way that each citizen views how the rest of the civilization should be formed, is only dependent on like what we've been told about like where we find ourselves. Like we just so happen to be able to like we just so happen to know the words capitalism, socialism, and because of our life experiences. But if we were dropped somewhere and popped somewhere else, like we wouldn't even know what these terms are. We wouldn't even understand that these are the ways that civilization should organize itself. Like if we were born 1,000 years ago somewhere else, like these concepts should be foreign and we would have a completely different set of understanding of civilization. But anyways, the main thing I wanted to emphasize though is that like I feel like in our civilization, like in America, we have this heavy emphasis on like the administrators of like the engineer minded like STEM type of thinking, analytical thinking, and we don't emphasize the other ways of operating. And like I feel like if you were like the type of person that navigates towards communism, then like it would make more sense to find like-minded people and operate together in that way. Like more power to you. And if you're the type of person that wants to operate more from an anarchist point of view, orient yourself around people that are more anarchist and then live that way. But I feel like when you try to box everybody into the same way of being, um, that's what causes so much tension because your interests as an anarchist versus your interests as this communist are going to be completely different.
Yeah, and I think that doesn't just go with like political beliefs, but also like, countries and what we want as a country. I think that's one of the biggest problems with when we talk about white colonialism was the colonialists came in and they were like us first, everybody else comes second, and they don't matter. And we are only looking out for our best interests. And if we destroy entire civilizations of other people, we don't care because we want everyone to be basically the same as us anyway. So, you know, I think that's definitely problematic. It's interesting because in yoga, obviously, the ultimate goal is to not identify with anything, right? Again, like this idea of like
Yeah.
everything else, everything's a false identity. That's a really big thing and probably not very practical for the most of us. So that's why I think like these other sacred texts are really interesting, because there are other sacred texts that talk about like, okay, great. That sounds really awesome, that I'm just going to go and live and not be attached and identify with anything. But frankly, I live in the world and I work a job and I make money, and I'm an administrator or a head of something or a leader, or I rule things. And so where do I find guidance in
Yeah.
that? And that's what's really interesting, I think, about the Mahabharata that we were talking about before, which is the text in which the Bhagavad Gita takes place, because the Bhagavad Gita, is this middle part of the Mahabharata. But there's a lot of talk in the Mahabharata, particularly about Yudhishthira, who is the great ruler, and the difference between Duryodhana and Yudhishthira and the way that they rule, and how Duryodhana is very selfish in his ruling, and how Yudhishthira is like the image of, the great benevolent ruler, and how he treats the people, and how he's very fair, and how he distributes the money. And this is this idea of teaching people that, like, even within these kingdoms, even within this ruling, even within this, the people who are in these positions of power can be very corrupt, like Duryodhana was, or they can be very benevolent and inclusive and
Yeah.
generous, the way Yudhishthira was. And then there's another text, which maybe is not as relevant about the leadership, but also Swami Satchidananda used to quote the Tirrukkural by Tiruvallur a lot. And the Tirrukkural is very interesting because it's a Tamil text. And it's very interesting because it's very practical. It's like, how do you live in relationship? How do you be a good parent? How do you be a good husband or wife? How do you be a good business owner? How do you be a good citizen? How do you like work in the world and navigate this world and still be um in alignment and, you know, authenticity and all that stuff that we are all trying to be in this day and age? How do you be all those things? Some of it feels, a little maybe not 2025.
Yeah.
But some of it is actually still really powerful. And some of it really still is very valid. And if you haven't had the chance to actually, the Tirukkural is like very small little snippets, and it's in chapters, and you can read the chapter, and then it has like the little um, pieces about it. But um, some of it's very powerful. When we were young, we would always study these sacred texts, and then we would learn how to recite them. So the Tirukkural was one that we learned to recite um, when we were kids. And so then as I got older, we would study it more in depth. But it's a great text. I mean, it really has still a lot of wisdom about how to live in harmony while you're still engaging in the world. And
Mm.
in fact, I don't really recall because it's been quite a while since I actually read the Tirukkural, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was a section about leadership. And I actually should probably go back and read it, because now I'm realizing like I don't know, and it's been probably 30 years since I read it. But
Mm.
it's very practical and really lovely, because it talks about these questions of like, how do I be a good student? How do I be a good husband? How do I be a good wife? How do I be a good parent? How do I be a good child? Like all of these things in the world that can be really confusing. Because again, ultimately, the Swami doesn't identify with any caste, creed, you know, religion, family, country, is totally neutral and doesn't have any attachments. That's, in the Bhagavad Gita, that's what Krishna is saying. Like, you release all of your attachments, you don't have attachment to anything. You withdraw all the senses and release all these worldly attachments. And that is the man of, ultimate wisdom.
Mm.
But most of us aren't there yet, so we could use a little guidance on the path until we get there. And it's really incredible how these yoga texts have these really practical, guidance. And again, some of it you have to take a little in context, but you know, it's still really powerful.
Yeah, yeah, it's reminding me that it's like we're playing house with the earth, and it's like we just so happen to be like, a bunch of beings in the forest kind of, and we're just kind of deciding how we want to live and play together. And
Mhm.
I love seeing the texts and like I haven't read that, but I have seen some of Swami Satchidananda's quotes. And he also wrote like, to know yourself, which I would say is a very practical book that kind of goes through the different multifaceted aspects of like human life, and it's just like talking about food and fasting and prayer and community and this and these different things that I think answers those questions, certainly at least up to the point at which he wrote that book. And I think what would be added now would be like how we interact with virtual reality, um medicine, or different like medical interventions. We're talking about Botox, from Botox to vaccines to steroids to all that kind of stuff, all this technology that we have. And then the real international touch that we have. Like, they might have felt different people from different villages were dispersed if you were walking from on foot. But like now we have like a much more interconnected space. So, and that's what I loved about yoga was like, and yoga, the swamis that taught yoga is that like it's very practical. It's very practical, and it's very much like experience driven. It's very much like here's the idea, because it's like it's never like you must do this, and if you don't do this, then like you're done. It's sort of like when you experience when you try to do this practice that this sacred text says makes you a good husband. You can say, "Okay, do I already do that?" No. Okay. How have the results been for me acting the way that I'm acting now? Not that good. Okay, let me try this. And that's how you develop like faith in conviction in the text. And that's the only way I think it works for me to really believe something. But it's not meant to like, yeah, if you try it and it doesn't work, then don't continue with that. But I like the idea of like we're just playing house. It's sort of like these are all just titles. This is all like really in the human imagination. Even like, title son, father, these are all just like roles that we play. But the human mind, for whatever reason, or the human personality seems to want to play house. Like we seem to like to play house, like just playing house in and of itself. We also seem to like to play fight, like, and it's funny because when I was thinking about like the warring states and like even Europe's history of war that we talked about, like the colonial system is like this is very much a game. It's war gaming. It's a game. It's like it's a game mindset.
Yeah.
Um, Unfortunately, but still also it also does like reflect that light that like some people just like it just because it's fun. Like some of us like to organize society. Some of us like to think like, oh, what would utopia look like? Like, what if we all had to? What if we all made the same, or what if we all had complete and total freedom? Like, we like to like fantasize about those things just because it's fun to play house, and like I think there's something really beautiful about that. Like, when you have a dog that has just a completely different set of instincts and mannerisms, like you see, it's almost like, oh, they're just like the way my dog plays, it's like she came out the box wanting to play that way. Like she likes to
Mm,
like go down like this. She has certain gestures that she does, and he wants to do this, like, and it's like predictable across, and I think that we're
yeah.
like that. And I remember Swami Satchidananda wrote in uh I think it's in The Golden Present, and it's like, just remember, like, never lose sight that like it's all like a game. It's not my dad used to say it's not what it's about. There's a depth to this. We're kind of you're acting as the banker, I'm acting as like the loner, you're acting as this, but really we're just like beings. And I guess like George Washington was kind of emphasizing that point. Although he wasn't able to perfectly practice it, he did make it a point of emphasis that at least if at least amongst the political class, y'all have to practice unity. If we can't do it anywhere else in the civilization, maybe the churches can't, maybe the schools can't, maybe the individual neighborhoods can't, but if you can have a political class that orients itself towards like unity, then maybe we'll be all right. Because when man on an individual level orients themselves towards unity, we find the solutions, we find God, we find what we're looking for. And I think
It's
and I think
interesting because they're
yeah.
sorry,
What's up?
go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just thinking, like, if you think of it like as a game, right? Then there has
Yeah.
to be like a winning. You got to win the game. So
Yeah.
then, how do you win the game, right? So winning the game ultimately is achieving self-realization. You realize it's all a game. That's the
Yeah.
ultimate the game. But also, there's rules of the game, right? And you're going to get further along in the game if you follow the rules of the game. And so then, what are the rules? And so it's interesting because I just pulled up because when you said be a good citizen, it's funny because the minute you said that, like something was niggling kind of in the back of my brain was like, I think the Tirrukkural talks about this of like how to be a good citizen. So I just like did like a little Google search, and what comes up is, according to the Tirrukkural, a good citizen is one who embodies virtuous living, participates in society, and contributes to the welfare of the community. The text emphasizes that good citizenship is rooted in a person's private ethical life, which then expands to encompass their role in the family and broader society. So things that are included are integrity and honesty. A good citizen is honest and maintains integrity in all their deeds. Truthfulness is a paramount virtue that cleanses the heart. Self-control, practicing self-control over one's thoughts, words, and actions is essential. Compassion. The text promotes a compassionate attitude towards all beings, regardless of their background. Compassion should motivate a citizen's actions both in this world and in the next. Humility and modesty. Greatness is characterized by humility, while pettiness is accompanied by arrogance. A sense of shame at thought of wrongdoing is a sign of modesty. And avoiding vice. A virtuous life requires abstaining from anger, envy, greed, and harmful speech. So it's so interesting, right? Because like that's the rules, right? Those are the rules of the game. So like, yeah,
Mm,
I mean, you can live a different way, but like you're not going to win the game very fast. Like, right? You're going to derail yourself in the game. So you're going to
yeah.
have to keep playing the game longer and longer and longer, because the only way to win the game is ultimately to like, start embodying these different ways, which then eventually leads you to the end result, which is, enlightenment. But you're going to get to the end faster. You're going to achieve the ultimate goal of the game if you play by the rules of like, you know, or you could just have like instantly you could win the game if you had the ability to just like, wow, boom, wake up, I'm aware.
Mm,
But
mhm.
instead, most of us are not going to be able to get to the end of the game that fast. And so we have to do all these steps along the way of the game. And part of that is being a good citizen, being a good leader, being a good husband, being a good wife. And so that's why I think like the Mahabharata, the Tirrukkural, they give these examples of how to live a virtuous life so that you are essentially, going to make it further along in the game faster. That's just kind of what's coming up for me right now. It's
No,
just
that's
because
dope.
think about it like in that way, right?
Yeah, and I think the game mindset aspect towards life kind of changes even how you like interact with it, because it's like when you're playing a game, like you want to win the game, or it's like you're also not attached. You're not completely attached to the outcome of the game. Like at least not every game you play. Like some people are sore losers. I've met many and I beat them. But no, fine. I think that like when you take the mindset of like these are just the rules of the game, and like it's pretty straightforward. And and it's like that's why I kind of love video games, is that like they've really, those of us that like video games and played a lot of them, it like really helps with that analogy, because when you play video games, like if you're playing like an adventure game, like life is sort of like an adventure game with like multiple people along the line that are kind of, they're kind of placed along the way, and you have different options you can take, and you have a certain skill set, specific to that video game. And but in video games, what's really beautiful, and I think that it's also a reflection of like life, um, certainly from one point of view, is that like you don't really get punished for not succeeding. Like you might get held back. You might have to redo the level, but it's
Mm.
not really a punishment. Like, as you're going to the end of the level, like you're sharpening your skills, you're getting better, and then you eventually pass the level, you get a checkpoint, and then now you're on to the next challenge, and it's more so like every single step of the way you're getting sharper, you're getting sharper, you're getting sharper. And it's easy to kind of get that mindset when you're playing the game because it's very obvious that you're essentially getting better at holding the controller and moving your thumbs, right? But it's a whole mental thing. And I think like with yoga helps us look at life like that. Like you are the controller of the mind body. This is the instrument of seeing. This is the instrument of you are not this, but this is just the instrument. This is sort of like the controller, the console, and the TV, and you can play with this as you will. um I was
I love
talking I was
the idea of like also your skill set, right? You have to gain skills along the way. So imagine if the skills you have to gain to be able to, up level in the game are integrity and honesty,
mm,
self-control, compassion. Like these are just skills, like, right? You have to get them as you go along so that you can then level up and get to the next level of the game. It
100%.
feels much different when you think of it that way than like, oh, I'm just supposed to be this thing or, but if you think about like the whole game analogy, which Swami Satchidananda talked about the game analogy a lot.
It's called
That was
Yogaville.
one of his favorites. Like he really did use that game analogy a great deal when he was talking about this. And so, yeah, these are just like your leveling up skills. Like I got to level up my compassion so that I can, or gain more of compassion as a skill so I can level up to the next level. And it doesn't mean it's bad or good. Like you were saying, you don't get punished. It's not bad or good if you can't figure your way through the game. It's just some people are better at navigating. They navigate through faster. And then other people, it takes them a little bit longer. And instead, they're lost in anger and frustration and
Yeah,
hatred and fear and all these things. And then
yeah,
they can't get the skills. They got to replace it with the other skills so that they can level up and make their way to the end of the game, which is why all these texts are important. They're like the little, they're like what do you guys call those? Like cheat codes or cheat
yeah,
sheets or,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. They really do feel like that, and it's like the codes that are the most important are the ones that I feel like they're like most commonly repeated amongst the text, where it's like, all right, like this is really something here. And what I really love about like the game analogy, to take a little bit further, is it goes like, okay, when you're playing a game, you as like I'm going to use like a shooting game, for example. Shooting game has a certain amount of skills. You could say accuracy, like your ability to stay on the target once you found the target. Then you could say like your quickness or your reflexes. So from not finding the target to finding the target. Then we call it strafe, which is like your movement. How do you move your body so that the person that you are targeting can't target you easily? And
Hmm.
then there's the auxiliary. Like if it's like a regular shooting game, like based on real life, it'll be like grenades, medicine packs, um, which are kind of opposite things, right? Which different tools outside of like things that you can pick up and grab and carry with you. And but at the base, like me, like my favorite way is like no tools, no nothing, just straight hands, just straight aiming. But so people can be good at these different things. There might be a person like you take away like his skill set, and now he's not really good at the shooting game at all, vice versa. But as you're playing like the adventure games, the or as you're playing these games, depending on your preference, you get more skilled in that way and how to handle more situations. Like so, so like for example, it's like in order to get in order to make the most out of your quick reflex time, it benefits you to be good at throwing grenades, for example, because now you can supplement your baseline skill, your baseline talent with these other things. So as you play these games, in order to get to the next level, in order to even make it to that level, you have to like have a certain level of proficiency. And then, so you're building your proficiency to handle life, but you're also getting the accolades. You're getting the life experience. You're getting the confidence. You're getting you are, you know, even nowadays, like how many of those gamers are literally millionaires, right? Like you might actually get some sort of reward, clout with your friends for being good. So what's cool about this game like analogy and how it's like life is like the more you play the game, the more you're capable to receive. Like winning that top level of the game is a higher high than winning level 1. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's like motivation to keep going, to keep pushing. Like I'll use a hiking analogy. It's like the view from the bottom of the mountain versus the top of the mountain is not the same spectrum, but it takes a ton of work to get there. And having that aspect of life and enjoying that work, enjoying that process. And I think like as citizens, as people, there's so much about our life. Like first of all, we don't even know about the rules. But even as we're gaining the rules, we start to hate the rules. We're like, what do you mean we're supposed to be compassionate? Like, no, I'm supposed to be a ruthless leader, Um,
Yeah.
I'm supposed to, my way or the
Like
highway.
you have to stumble your way through the game in the beginning because nobody's telling you the rules of how to actually
Like, imagine if I just gave you football pads and was like, go, you're on their team, go. And or the rules that you're given aren't the rules of the game.
right.
Someone's like, nah, pass the ball to that guy. It's not an interception. Don't worry about that.
Mm-mm.
And I think, yeah, I don't even remember kind of what I was going with that, but that's like, I like the game analogy. I think it's pretty fun one to like go with. And I think it would help liberate a lot of people when they look at their life where it's like, we're talking about money. Money is a game. All these, like, your marriage is a game. You're playing house. Like, yeah, it's a game. Like, so don't get so attached to like, oh, I have to play all my games the same. I play all my games like the warrior. I play all my no, it's like, no, like, no, you're in the healing mode now. You gotta play the game like the healer. Oh, when it comes to money, you gotta think like the money maker, like, or not because you're not identified to these things, because you can put these things on and off. And I think that's the luxury of being unidentified. It's like Swami Satchidananda, if you saw him, what do you mean he's not identified? Like, what do you mean he's not identified? I mean, he's obviously wearing orange, he's wearing a certain color, but no, that's not really what he means, is that he can put on different things. He can play different roles. I didn't meet him, but from what I see is like you
Yeah,
can,
no, you're
you know, you
absolutely
know,
correct. Mm-hmm.
you're fluid in your personality. You're not stuck. You're not rigid. You're not one way. And I think that's like a big problem in civilizations is that as Americans, we were raised how to be good citizens in a democracy, and we were raised how to be good capitalists. But that's not really the whole of the being. And I love that explanation there really does give like a more holistic, detailed explanation of how to be a good person, a good citizen, which is really like sounds like a good person to me.
I love also what you're saying about like the ability to shift. In leadership, we talk a lot about shifting and whether your communication is effective or not effective, whether your action is effective or not effective. So it's all very neutral, but it's definitely like this idea of like being able to shift. So let's just say, you have a conversation with your partner or you do a certain action with your partner and it doesn't land, right? It doesn't have the meaning by saying it doesn't land. You do not get the result that you were hoping for. But what we tend to do as humans is we just do it again, thinking we're going to get a different result.
Yeah.
Do it again, thinking we're going to get a different result. Then we do it again. And we're like, if I just keep doing it, then eventually I'm going to get a different result. And we don't realize, like, no, you're never going to get a different result. You're not
Mhm.
going to get the different result until you shift and do something else. And then you shift and you go, oh, okay, that didn't give me the result I wanted. It was different. It was closer, but I still don't get the result. So now I got to shift again and try it again and get the result I want. And so I think that's also really a powerful idea when you're thinking about like, moving your way through life and playing this game and like just looking at like, not good or bad, just did you get the result you wanted? You go into a job interview. Did you get the result you wanted? Not good or bad. Not that guy's an asshole because he didn't give me the job or not, I'm stupid because I didn't get the job. Just, okay, I went in. I didn't get the result I wanted. What do I need to shift in order to get the result I want? I mean, it's even the same in meditation. Like, You can sit down in meditation and you can try one practice and be like, that wasn't quite right. Like, sometimes you got to find it and then you can stick with it and you can,
Yeah.
cultivate it to get stronger in the results. So once you start getting an idea of like, okay, this is a little taste of the results I want. If I keep doing this, it'll get stronger and better.
Mm.
But it's just amazing to me how many people go in and like do the same thing over and over and over again. I think
Yeah.
somebody somewhere does that quote that floats around. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So
100%.
I think like if you're thinking about it as a game, right? Like if you're playing a video game and you go through and you end up getting killed,
Yeah.
because you went through, the whatever, you went around a door a certain way and there was somebody there waiting to kill you, and then you have to go back to the beginning. You don't do it again. You don't go,
Yeah.
"Oh, no, let me go do that again, and let me go do
Yeah.
that again," and eventually he's not gonna do it. You're like, "No, I gotta go find a different path, a different way
Yeah.
through." So we see
100.
that so clearly when we look at it like that, but in our own lives, we're just, like, so stuck with this, like, "No, I gotta just keep doing the same thing." It's
Mm.
crazy.
I love that, and what I love about the reset, the restart, I call that, like, healing forgiveness, like the immune system aspect of life, and it's like, the challenge is that if anybody's played a video game, I don't care how good you are, you cannot be good enough at the video game in advance to just go through the level on, like, hard. Like, if you were to do, like, the hardest version of the game, like, you have to go run that corner. Like, some games, I'm using an example, it's like, that might be the only hallway you can go down. You know the guy's gonna be there, but the only way that you can beat that like, the first time, "Oh, I can't go this, I have to jump and go in. Okay, no, this time I'm gonna crawl and go in. Okay, no, this time I'm gonna have this weapon. Okay, this time I need to have this much.
Right. I have to get this tool to level up so that
I have to get
and then
this
I can
tool."
get in there and have the right tools to make it through that situation.
Exactly, and I think that that's, like, but that's all fun. That's why people spend all night playing video games. That's really the majority of the gaming, like, the game itself, if you could just run through it, it might be, like, 12 hours, but most people spend 10 times that amount trying to beat a level, and, um, and I think that that's part of the game here is I like that George Washington kinda said, "Our political game here has to be about unity. We're trying to prove a point." The point is that if we have warring states that are right next to each other, like France and Spain and in England, and how they and Italy and yeah, Italy or the Holy Roman Empire, and how those people, they're right next to each other, and all they spend their time doing is fighting. Like, we don't need to do that. We have a much vaster space than any of those individual states. Already, already by the time the 13 colonies were formed, it was already
Yeah.
much vaster than like the geographical space that say was under, like, right there under France, physically there. Um He's like, if we orient ourselves towards unity, and it just made so much sense. It's like, we'll be able to thrive. We'll be able to, like, create things and do things, and like it was not a capitalist point of view at all. It was very much just like, this is just a better way to live with each other if we focus on unity, and we don't have to fight. And I love that I'm able to kind of, like, that mindset makes so much sense to me. I think, like, even like me as an American, when I see, like, even when I just see like a map of all the countries, it looks strange to me because I'm like, a lot of these countries are smaller than states, and they're sitting here, like, beefing with other countries smaller than our states. Like, it's such a foreign, it's such, like, a weird mindset, and I think their point. I think that was their point. Like, what if there's a generation of people that, um, say it is what it is. If you don't like it, you don't like it, but this is how we think, and a thought about unity as the primary step when we engage with states, our first step should be unity. How can we and I think that's, like, the underlying force behind, how do you pronounce it? The Tirrukkural?
Tirrukkural.
Tirrukkural?
Yeah, Tirrukkural.
Tirrukkural. Um, it's like, because these things are harmonious, these things are good for unity. When you and I love, and I don't remember if I brought this up when I brought up the, Outwitting the Devil, the book that I was reading by Napoleon Hill. I don't know if I finished it by that time, but I certainly finished it now. And he said, it's interesting, the devil said, "The very first thing a person needs to do is take care of themselves. I trick people into thinking they don't have to take care of themselves. But
Mm,
what we mean is what the Tirrukkural says is you have to focus on your internal integrity and let it shine out rather than thinking you can do things around that'll like make up for that internal lacking. And I think that that was like a really good, that's why I love that that was in there. And that made me think of like how that was the other side of the coin where not take care of yourself in this modern sense, but it's like emphasize peace of mind. You know,
yeah.
how I'll think about it. If you don't emphasize your own peace of mind and you try to act like we've said many, many times, or thinking that it's not important or not thinking that your vessel's important and is sort of like critical to this whole civilization because he's like if I can get you thinking about everybody if I can get everybody thinking about everybody else then nobody's taking care of themselves.
Hmm.
And I think um that's like a very and you know that was like a cool little correlation between those two texts where it emphasizes that that internal integrity for a citizen rather than always emphasizing on that person doing something wrong or that person not complying with this or that person not paying enough taxes or that person thinking the wrong ideology rather than emphasizing that which is so much of our discourse like in our country is finger pointing on how other people aren't acting the same way we want them to act, rather than emphasizing on are we acting the way that we want to act? How do we show up in our personal lives when we're in our bedroom by ourselves? Do we fall for that temptation or do we resist it when no one's looking? Like I think those are the things, and I love that that emphasize that a good citizen emphasizes that because they know that like nothing's really hidden. Like we're always impacting each other. We do in the darkness, what we do like secretly is always impacting one another.
I think it's interesting when you're talking about Washington talking so much about unity because that was a similar thing with Swami Satchidananda, but he was talking about instead of like states or countries, like having unity in religions. And so at Yogaville, we have this incredible temple in the shape of a lotus flower, and it is called the Light of Truth Universal Shrine. And this was one of his, great accomplishments. He really wanted to bring people together
Yeah.
in instead of people fighting in the name of religion, bringing unity in the name of religion. And so showing that at the heart of all religions, they're all the same. So when you go to the Lotus Shrine, which is beautiful, there had been many, many years of work that needed to be done on it, and they just had a rededication this past weekend of the shrine itself. And when you go into the shrine in the bottom, it's got this beautiful display, and in each display it shows the artifacts from each religion. And if you're down in the bottom, you're like, wow, these religions have nothing to do with each other. They have all these different texts and imagery and different symbols and all of these things that make them seem really, really different and separate. And then when you go upstairs, there's this beautiful light that comes from the middle and goes up and then branches out to all the different altars. And when it branches out to all the different altars, at each altar is a saying about the light. And so you see that like light is the unity in all these religions. And it's interesting that like I think, great leader, every truly great leader, every like enlightened leader is going to see that unity is the answer, not diversity, not splitting people apart, not bringing, fear, hatred, all of these things into the environment, but really seeing like if we can bring unity, we are stronger and better off than if we are divisive and diverse. Not diverse in like, I think diversity, that's what the bottom is about, right? Like there can be diversity, but there can also be unity in the diversity. And I think that's really something very beautiful that we don't have to be homogenous. Doesn't mean we all have to be the same, but there can definitely be unity in the diversity. And I think that's also what Washington was trying to say, is like we have a very diverse nation, but we have to find the unity in the diversity of this nation to make it strong and make it work. And I would say we're not doing the best job of that at this present moment.
Yeah. No, no. I mean that's why it was so relevant and so beautiful and so interesting. I thought it was really interesting how he made it a point to say like don't expect opposition. Don't expect that divisive don't expect that divisive force to be very obvious. Like make space for it to be subversive. Make space for there to be like things happening behind the scenes that you're not aware of. And I love the idea that Swami Satchidananda had. Like I'm in construction, it's the same mindset. Like there's one superintendent, the job will be done on this time. You will work overtime, and then you will work overtime. And if I have to stack the trades, we'll stack the trades. But like just the mindset, you have to have like that central. You need to have someone that can be entrusted with that position. And then I think that like everybody around them, once the plan is agreed upon, like it's go, everybody's go. And I think like the problem with the board is like unless each of the board members are like, I think hypothetically speaking, you could have a system in which like a cabinet like system, but each of the cabinet heads would have to be like the absolute authority. So it's like we go like, okay, we have this thing we want to implement. It's gonna, that's like by say the head director or whatever, and that's gonna involve these three cabinets. Like from this point on, it's just under the jurisdiction of y'all three, and that you have the final say in each of those things. Like that's how it was on each job site. It was like the superintendent and the project manager. Yeah, we worked for the bosses, but if we didn't have that liberty to make our own decisions and actually like have authority to be like, no, this is what we're doing, and I'm sorry if you don't like it, you can go somewhere else. If you don't have that capacity, it's very hard to get very meaningful things done, like big things done. And it's interesting, this kind of wraps into like astrology a little bit as we move into Virgo. Virgo is about that, like Virgo is about the virgin, and really what it represents is like purity and that discernment about what can be accepted, what can't be accepted. It's about that meticulousness. It takes like the energy of Leo, which is like that, like that summertime, peak summertime, just like I'm here to shine. And it says like now what's fun is like the organizing, deciding
Yeah.
what should stay, deciding what needs to leave, all in the name of purification.
Yeah.
And I think America needs to drop the division. It's not it's a toxifying agent. It was identified in the very beginning as a toxifying agent. He even says that like he goes, I know this is a democracy, so we might vote in things that might be counterproductive to what I'm saying. So I'm not going to fight that, but all I'm going to say is that we must be vigilant of the tendency of um certain organizations, certain things to like subvert the will of the people, essentially. Um,
It was
and
amazing how they had so much foresight. Like when you read these papers now, or like you go back and you like listen to what they were grappling with, how incredibly insightful they were. They could foresee the dangers of what would happen and where we would end up like now, right? Like the challenge that we're having now with our government and our systems and the way that was all set up. They really did give a lot of thought, and especially for them to envision and imagine all the different ways this could go. That is just really fascinating and beautiful to me to see the inspiration. And really, it had to be some kind of divine inspiration for them to be able to foresee so much that would happen. And really, their words being so relevant now as we grapple with so many of these issues, and that they
yeah,
kind of thought about it, right?
they
They,
did.
they foresaw that we could get to this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Like that's why I'm a Virginian. It's like this is what we learned about them is that like they were not like simpletons. Yes, absolutely slave owners and men of their time, and probably killed a bunch of people, probably lashed a bunch of people, probably had a way more violent lifestyle than any of the average men that you've ever met. Like, but all of that aside, like I think that there was balance. I think like everybody I know has balance. So I'm thinking to myself, why would I not give that to some of these men? And like even like George Washington was an Aquarius. This is what Aquarius is. It's like forward thinking, like focus
Mm.
on the career, forward thinking, detached, obsessed with the career like archetype, but really because they care about really because they care about societal thinking. And and you see the way you see it in his writing, and then like Thomas Jefferson, by contrast, is an Aries, like initiative, first starting, outgoing, but very much in like first thrust of life type energy, like the starter. And that's when you see in his writing, he's like, "There's God. Like I don't know what else to tell you. There's nothing else to talk about. Like this is where the buck stops." Like, and you see they have both spectrums of thought articulated, where it's
Mhm.
sort of like, I can give you like a long flowery explanation on how this will happen, on how this will happen, on how this will happen, and things to look for. But it's also like, if, as long as you're defending these things, as long as you're defending your capacity to free think, like then it's funny because he says like thoughtful and wise men who read these words will understand like what I mean. Like, you know what I mean? Like years from now, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
Yeah.
And yeah, it just a lot of these things like are a part. That's how I know it's a part of the play, because s- the more context you get, even the way history's written, it's like a play. It's like, it's like a reality TV show, like kind of energy, where it's like, this is so crazy. These cast of characters came together at this time with this type of thinking, but also this type of strength, and also these types of faults, all at the same time to create this thing. And I was looking at like,
Yeah.
the Washington State was like founded in 18. I could probably look it up. Let me see. Washington.
Can hear him typing away.
So, okay, so November 11th, 1889 was
Oh,
when,
okay.
and I'm like, that's like 250 years plus later than people started living in Virginia. Like, think about that scale of
Mhm.
time. And so uh, all that's to say is that like, when it comes to like our civilization, when I think about it, it's like a civilization that's not tailored towards unity or cohesion within itself, like, is no civilization at all. Really, it's just like neighbors, I guess you could say. And
Yeah.
like, you're not working as a unit. You're not working towards this common goal of unity. And just like you're saying, like, I feel like that has been like cut to shreds. Because I don't think unity is necessary for the government to function. Like, from the government's point of view, like, they would almost rather there be tension, um, because as long as what the position is, as long as whatever's being done to execute the agreed upon position, then those things will happen. And if there has to be division, then there will be division. Because often when the people are unified, we usually don't agree, you know, just by default, by like the way that we live, we just usually don't agree with the people that are setting the position of the government
Yeah.
in the first place. And it's like, I like the idea. I like what you said. It's like, none of us are raised really with like, what's a good president supposed to be like? And I
Yeah.
almost feel like part of that's on purpose. What's a good head of CIA supposed to look like? What's a good senator supposed to look like?
Yeah, it's so fascinating because I mean, I had a pretty interesting education and upbringing, and my particular
Yeah.
teacher really into history. Like, she taught us a lot of history, and she taught us a lot of like really practical history, and we learned a lot about, our forefathers. But it's interesting. I don't ever remember reading Washington's farewell address, which would be so important. Like, you would think that would be like, okay, here's our first president. He's been president for a while. He's got some advice to give
Yeah.
us as a
Yeah.
nation, and he clearly had a lot to say about it.
Yeah.
And yet, why is this not required reading of everybody? Right? To be like, well, what does a good president look like? What should we be voting for? What should we be looking for? Wow. Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess all of us can go back and read it. I guess, if we didn't read it in high school, the least we can do, or go back and listen to it if you're somebody who doesn't read.
Yeah. Have
Um,
a dictionary with you. Yeah, there are some
Yeah,
words
or,
that make old school.
just find a PDF and upload it into ChatGPT and have, ChatGPT read it out to you or something, or one of those apps or something. But I really think like any way you can absorb the information or get access to it, I think would be really useful. I think that's some good homework for all of us because it's in these texts and in this wisdom, that we really when something when something has been written not long ago and still feels really true, that is like that is like steady wisdom. That is wisdom that we can kind of rely on. And in the Yoga Sutras, they talk about like, how do you know right knowledge?
Yeah.
And right knowledge is this idea that like they talk about saints and sages, but also like stuff that really was written and then still holds true for a long amount of time. You can pretty much assume that that's like right knowledge. And so I kind of feel like, it'd be interesting to go back and read this and see how much of it really sort of rings true even today and how much is still relevant to our questions now.
Hmm.
Uh, and that's, I guess, why the Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita rings true with so many people because it is relevant, as relevant today as it was, thousands of years ago or whenever it was written.
And I love, like, as, like, an instructor, you get this, like, unique experience where you might even you might teach some of your friends, and you'll get to meet some of them before they started practicing, and then you get to see them as they start to practice, and what they always say is, like, "I feel like I'm better at being a person overall." Like, they feel like their relationships are starting to shift, like, not everything is cured overnight, but, like, so much of that citizenship that we're talking about, like, they're able to be act in more integrity, act more compassionately, have the strength to be more honest, and the inclination to do all of those things, like, you know, as they start to deepen their just their physical yoga practice and maybe hanging out,
Yeah.
like, me a couple times or just hanging out, whatever, and because like, you hang out with me or take my class, then you might be more open to an opportunity with another instructor or with another spiritual person or just anyone else that you identify as in my cast of people, and I think that's what I've seen is that, like, just doing the practices, just the hatha, just the asana, that little om at the end, maybe some pranayama, you're doing it consistently, you can see some shifts. And that's what draws people further into like, practicing and practicing more because it seems like a holistic improvement on their life. And it helps like um the problems that they can change, it helps them change them. And it also helps give the wisdom that help for the things that they can't change. And
Cool.
and I think that's all, like, citizens really mean because, like, civilization is just the sum of the citizens' minds, really, and, like, all the vices that we see, like, we'll probably go into it more in future podcasts, but, like, a lot of the major vices, um, you know, problems in our society are very much, like, downstream because we have individuals, um, that that practice them, and if we practiced unity. Yoga literally is like union. If we practice unity with self, unity with that authenticity within ourselves, and I'm even working on it within myself, but just practicing that, getting sharper at it over time, is really like the goal of this game. And like just kind of seeing like what we can rack up because I feel like you can never decrease like, you can decrease, but, like, you might not be able to run faster, you might not be prettier all your life, you might not do this, but you can increase your compassion.
Yeah, you
You
can.
might not be sharp, you
Yeah.
might not be, like, whatever, but you can increase certain qualities of yourself much, much further into life.
Yeah. And win at the game.
And win. Ha.
And win. So go out, do yourself a favor, go do some yoga. Also, check out these texts. If you don't have access to the actual text, we all have access to Google now, and Google has access to AI, and AI has knowledge of all the different texts. And so just like I did, just like go in and just query it. Like find out what the Yoga Sutra says about something, find out what the Bhagavad Gita or the Tirrukkural says about something, and and just sort of see like what are the next things that you can do to level up. What skills do you get to gather in this game of life to try to level up and be able to actually win the game of life, which is possible, and ultimately gain enlightenment and self realization and really find that peace and joy and happiness that all of us are looking for every single day.
Absolutely. I mean, I ain't got nothing else to add to that.
I think that's good for today. Well, thank you so much.
Thank
Quentin,
you.
always a joy.
Love you, Radha. I'll talk to you later.
Love you too, Almond.
Peace.